Brandon Cole grabbed the little girl's backpack and held it over his head, laughing, while she screamed for her father and clawed at the air trying to reach it. Inside that bag was her emergency inhaler. Inside that bag was the only thing standing between her and a full asthma attack. Brandon knew that. He had checked the bag before he took it. That was the moment Logan Hayes stopped walking. He did not raise his voice. He did not run. He turned slowly. The way a man turns when he has already decided exactly what he is going to do. And every person standing in that park felt something shift in the air around them, something they could not name but could absolutely feel. Nobody in Cedar Hollow knew what Logan Hayes had been before he became a mechanic. Nobody knew what name crowds had once chanted inside arenas. And before this afternoon was over, Brandon Cole was going to wish he had never found out. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe if you are new, because this one is going to stay with you long after it ends. Part 1. Logan Hayes backed his truck into the driveway of his garage at 6:45 that Saturday morning and had already decided the day was going to be a good one. He could hear Lily inside the house. She was talking to herself the way she always did when she was getting ready, a running commentary on everything she was doing. Half narration, half argument with herself. Completely unaware that anyone could hear her. He stood beside the truck for a moment with his keys in his hand and just listened. She was saying something about her colored pencils. She was upset because she could not find the brown one. She needed brown because there was a red-tailed hawk she had seen at the pond last week, and she was not going to draw it without getting the colors right. Logan smiled and went inside. The house was not large. 3 bedrooms, 2 of which were used, a kitchen that always had something drying on a dish towel beside the sink, and a living room where Lily had claimed the corner near the window as her permanent workspace. There were drawings pinned to a corkboard she had asked for on her 8th birthday. Birds. Mostly. Some trees. A few portraits of people she had seen at the park and found interesting enough to remember. She drew people the way a careful observer draws them, catching the detail that made them recognizable rather than the detail that made them beautiful. Logan found the brown pencil on the kitchen counter beside the coffee pot. He did not know how it had gotten there. He carried it back to the living room doorway and held it up. Lily turned from her backpack, looked at it, and pointed at him. "I was looking for that for 10 minutes. I know, I heard. You were outside. The window was open." She took the pencil from him with the very specific gravity of a 9-year-old who has been wronged by the universe and is not yet ready to admit the universe has been corrected. Then she went back to packing her bag. The notebook went in first. Then the pencil case. Then the small field guide to North American birds that had belonged to her mother, and that Lily handled with both hands every single time she moved it from one place to another. Logan watched her put the field guide in and zip the bag closed. "You packed your inhaler?" he said. Lily gave him a look that contained roughly 40 years of patience she had not yet lived. "Yes." "Dad." "Where is it? Front pocket." "You are sure, Dad?" He let it go. She had packed it. She always packed it. He asked every time because he was her father, and it was the only thing in her daily routine that genuinely frightened him. The asthma had come on strong when she was 6, the year after her mother died, and the doctors had told him stress could be a trigger. Logan had spent 3 years trying to build a life so low stress that her lungs would have nothing to react to. He was not entirely sure it was working, but her episodes had become less frequent. And the one thing he could control was making sure that accommodation was always within reach. They drove to Oak Ridge Park with the windows down, because Lily liked the wind, and Logan liked whatever made Lily happy. It was a simple equation, and he had been running on it for 3 years. Cedar Hollow was the kind of town that still had a diner where the owner knew your order and a hardware store where the man behind the counter had opinions about lumber. It sat in a valley between 2 ranges of Colorado mountains, and in late spring the air had a quality to it that Logan had never been able to fully describe, something between cold and warm. Something that smelled like pine and distance. He had come here looking for quiet, and he had found it. And for 3 years quiet had been exactly what he needed. Oak Ridge Park was 8 acres of trails, a pond, 2 open fields, and a grove of cottonwoods along the eastern edge that Lily considered her personal territory. The park had a small parking area and a set of wooden benches near the pond that were almost always occupied on Saturday afternoons by older residents who came to feed the ducks and argue about local politics in a friendly way that made Logan feel, each time he overheard it, that the world still had good things in it. He parked. Lily was out of the truck before he had the engine off. "Stay where I can see you," he called after her. "I will," she called back, already heading for the cottonwoods. He sat on the bench near the pond with a cup of coffee he had brought in a thermos and watched her. She moved through the trees slowly, stopping to look up, stopping to write something in the notebook. Moving on. A woman named Martha who came to the park every Saturday with a canvas bag full of bread crusts waved at him from across the pond. He waved back. An older man named Gerald, who had been a schoolteacher for 30 years and now spent his retirement feeding an opinion about everything to anyone who would listen, came and sat beside him uninvited and began talking about the new development proposal that Richard Cole's company had filed with the town council. Logan had heard about it. Everyone had heard about it. Richard Cole wanted to purchase the land on the northern edge of Oak Ridge Park and build a mixed-use luxury development retail on the ground floor. Condominiums above, a boutique hotel in the far corner. The proposal had been presented as a benefit to the community. It would bring revenue, Richard Cole's people said. It would bring jobs. It would bring a class of resident to Cedar Hollow that currently had no reason to come here. The people who came to Oak Ridge Park on Saturdays to feed ducks and watch birds and argue about local politics had a different word for what it would bring. They had several words, actually, and Gerald was currently deploying most of them in Logan's direction. Logan listened. He agreed with the substance, if not always the delivery. The park was the center of the town. Not geographically, but functionally. It was where people came when they needed to remember what they lived here for. You did not replace that with retail space and a hotel that charged $400 a night. He had signed the petition and against the development 3 weeks ago. He had attended the town council meeting where Richard Cole's representatives had presented glossy renderings of what the project would look like. He had not spoken at the meeting because he generally did not speak at public events unless he had something to say that no one else was going to say. That occasion had not arisen. Plenty of people had said plenty of things, and the council had taken the petition under advisement, which was the political version of placing something in a drawer and hoping it would resolve itself. Gerald was still talking. Logan nodded in the right places and kept his eyes on the cottonwoods. He saw Lily emerge from the trees and crouch at the water's edge. She was watching something, a bird on a branch across the pond. Probably. She had her notebook open. She was very still. She had her mother's patience when it came to watching living things. Her mother had been a wildlife photographer, and the quality she had passed to her daughter was not the eye for composition, but the willingness to wait. Logan finished his coffee and was considering whether to go refill it from the thermos in the truck when he heard the sound. It was not a single sound. It was a collection of sounds, voices. Laughter with an edge to it, the deliberate percussion of people trying to make themselves noticed. He did not turn immediately. He had learned a long time ago that the first response to a sound was almost always the wrong one. And what you did in the first 3 seconds of a confrontation often determined every second that followed. So he listened for another 3 seconds. Then he turned. There were 6 of them. They were young, early 20s. Maybe a few still in their late teens, and they moved through the park the way a group moves when it has decided that the space belongs to them, and everyone else is a guest who has not yet been informed of the terms. They were loud in a way that was entirely intentional. They wanted to be heard. They wanted to be looked at. They wanted the looking to carry the specific anxiety that comes from not knowing what someone is capable of. Logan knew the type. He had grown up around versions of it. He had spent years in gyms and arenas around the heightened version of it. The performance of menace was almost always exactly that, a performance. The question that mattered was not whether someone was performing it. The question was what they were willing to do when the performance did not produce the desired result. He recognized the one in front. Not personally, but he recognized the category. Brandon Cole was 23 years old and carried himself with the specific confidence of someone who had never experienced a consequence that his father's money could not resolve. He was not physically imposing. He was of average height and average build, with the kind of groomed appearance that required consistent attention and suggested someone who spent a meaningful amount of time on it. He was wearing clothes that were expensive in a way that was designed to be noticed. He had 3 friends close behind him and 2 more flanking slightly to either side. A formation that was almost certainly unconscious, but was also the exact configuration Logan had learned to read in the first 2 seconds of any dangerous situation. They passed Gerald's bench first. One of them knocked over the paper cup Gerald had set beside him on the bench. Not by accident. He looked directly at Gerald as he did it, and dared him with his eyes to say something. Gerald was 71 years old and had the look of a man doing an internal calculation that Logan recognized as the calculation of survival, the moment when a person accepts that the dignity of responding is not worth the cost of the response. Gerald did not say anything. They kept moving. Logan stood up from the bench, not quickly. He set his thermos down on the bench beside him, and stood up the way a man stands up when he has nowhere particular to be and no urgency about getting there. He watched them. He was not watching Brandon specifically. He was watching all 6 of them. The way you watch 6 things at once when you have spent enough years training your eyes to do it. They moved toward the pond, toward the cottonwoods, toward where Lily was still crouched at the water's edge with her notebook. Logan started walking. He was not running. He did not want to run. Running communicated alarm, and alarm changed the dynamics of what he was still hoping would remain a situation that could be resolved by his presence alone. He walked with purpose, which was different, and he covered the distance between the bench and the water's edge quickly enough that he, before Brandon Zreen's group reached Lily, but not so quickly that anyone watching would have been able to say afterward that he had rushed toward a confrontation. Lily heard him coming and looked up. She registered something in his face. He knew she could read him better than almost anyone, and she stood. "Dad, come here," he said quietly. She came to him. He put his hand on her shoulder, the kind of steady contact that communicated safety without communicating fear. He had learned to do that when she was very small, in the first months after her mother died, when she needed to be held in a way that made her feel stable rather than fragile. Brandon Cole stopped about 8 feet away and looked at both of them. Then he smiled. There are many kinds of smiles. Logan had learned to read them the way other men read maps as information about terrain. Brandon's smile was the kind that finds something small in front of it and is amused by how small it is. It was the smile of someone who has never had to consider what happens when the thing in front of them turns out to be larger than it looks. "Nice park," Brandon said. He was looking at Logan, but speaking to his friends. "Really nice park. Peaceful." He said the word peaceful the way you say a word when what you mean is the opposite. Logan said nothing. One of Brandon's friends, a broad-shouldered one on the left flank, had spotted Lily's backpack where she had left it on the ground near the water's edge. He looked at it. He looked at Brandon. Something passed between them that Logan caught and filed. "My daughter needs her bag," Logan said. He said it conversationally. Not a demand. Not a warning. Just the next true thing. Brandon looked at the bag, then he looked at Logan. "Yeah?" he said. And she needs her bag," Logan repeated. "Or what?" Logan did not answer. Brandon's friend, the broad-shouldered one, took 3 steps toward the bag. Lily made a small sound beside Logan. Not a cry. Not quite. Something between recognition and the beginning of fear. She had packed that bag herself that morning. She had put the field guide in with both hands. She had answered his question about the inhaler with the patience of a child who understood. Even if she did not want to, why, her father asked. "Don't," Logan said. One word. Quiet. The kind of quiet that was not the absence of volume, but the very precise management of it. The broad-shouldered one stopped. He looked at Logan. He had spent enough time around aggressive men to recognize that tone. It was the tone of someone who was not making a threat because a threat would be unnecessary. He looked at Brandon. Brandon had not stopped smiling. But something in his eyes had shifted slightly, a fractional recalibration that lasted less than a second, and then was covered over again. Logan had seen it. Logan noticed everything. "Relax," Brandon said. "We're just looking." "You have looked," Logan said. "Now you can go." A few of the other park visitors had stopped what they were doing. Martha had stopped distributing bread crusts. Gerald had stood up from his bench. Two women who had been walking on the trail near the cottonwoods had paused. A man with a dog had turned and was watching with the stillness of someone who is not sure yet whether to intervene or retreat. Brandon looked at the audience. He was pleased by it. Logan understood. The audience was the point. Without the audience, this was nothing. With the audience, it was a performance, and Brandon had come prepared for a performance. "You know what I heard about you?" Brandon said. He pitched his voice, so the people around them could hear it clearly. "I heard you used to fight. Like, professionally. MMA or something?" He paused, tilted his head. "You don't look like much of a fighter to me." Logan looked at him for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was even and unhurried and carried no heat in it at all. "Your father wants the land around this park," he said. "That is what this is about. You should have that conversation with the town council. Not here, not with my daughter." Something crossed Brandon's face. The smile did not disappear. But it changed quality, became something tighter. Something with more effort in it. "My father has nothing to do with this," Brandon said. "Then there is nothing to talk about," Logan said. "Pick up the bag." Lily. Lily moved toward her bag. The broad-shouldered friend moved at exactly the same moment. He picked it up before she could reach it. He held it up. Casually, in one hand, the way you hold something that belongs to someone smaller than you, because you want them to know that the size difference means something. Lily reached for it. He raised his arm. She could not reach it. She tried again. He watched her with an expression that Logan identified in the first fraction of a second as the expression of someone who has never been shown a reason to feel shame for what they are doing. It was that expression, more than anything that had happened before it, that clarified everything for Logan. He had not lost his temper. He was not going to lose his temper. Logan Hayes had not lost his temper in a physical situation since he was 22 years old, and a coach had sat him down and explained to him with patient precision that the moment you stop managing your anger and let your anger manage you is the moment you lose every advantage that your training is supposed to provide. But he had also made a decision. He moved toward the broad-shouldered one, and the 6 young men around him registered his movement simultaneously. And for 1 second, nobody did anything. Because there was something in the way Logan moved that short-circuited the usual sequence of provocation and response. He did not move like a man who was afraid of what happened next. He moved like a man who already knew. "Give her the bag," Logan said. He was standing 2 feet from the broad-shouldered one now. The young man was taller than him by an inch and outweighed him by perhaps 30 pounds. And had the look of someone who never considered that those 2 facts might not be the deciding factors in a situation. "Make me," the young man said. Logan looked at him. He looked at him the way men look at each other when one of them is deciding whether the other one really means what they just said. The broad-shouldered one held the gaze for about 4 seconds. Then he looked away. Just briefly. Just a flicker. But he looked away. He dropped the bag. He did not mean to. He had not decided to. But something in Logan's stillness had produced an instinctive response in him that his brain had not been consulted about. And the bag hit the ground, and Lily picked it up and pressed it against her chest. Brandon Cole watched all of this. His jaw had tightened. The performance was not going the way a performance needs to go when it is in front of an audience. The audience was still watching. And what they were watching was not what he had intended for them to watch. He took a step forward. "You think that was impressive?" Brandon said. He was no longer performing for the crowd. He was talking to Logan directly now, and his voice had dropped to something harder and more personal. You think you're something? You're a mechanic. You fix trucks. You live in that house with your sick kid, and you have nothing. My father owns half this valley, and you sign some petition like it means something. He let that sit for a second. It doesn't mean anything. You don't mean anything. Logan let him finish. He waited to make sure he was finished. Then he said, "If you touch my daughter's things again, the next part of this conversation will be very different." He picked up his thermos from the bench where he had left it. He took Lily's hand. He walked away. Behind them, Brandon said something to his friends. Something Logan did not turn around. For the crowd of park visitors watched Logan and Lily walk back toward the cottonwoods. Martha began distributing bread crusts again. Gerald sat back down on his bench. The man with the dog turned and resumed walking on the trail. The immediate crisis was over. But Logan had been around long enough to know the difference between a situation that was over and a situation that was paused. He sat with Lily on the bank of the pond in the shade of the cottonwoods and listened while she told him about the red-tailed hawk she had been watching when the group arrived. She had seen it catch something, she said. She had not been able to see exactly what. She drew it in her notebook, the posture of the hawk in the moment before it dove. Wings half spread, head angled down. She drew it with the brown pencil he had found on the kitchen counter that morning. Logan watched her draw and listened to the sounds of the park around them, and felt, beneath the calm he had trained himself to maintain, the very specific kind of awareness that had kept him alive in difficult situations since he was 19 years old. Brandon Cole had not gotten what he came for. That meant Brandon Cole would be back. And the next time, he would be better prepared. Logan sat beside his daughter in the afternoon light and watched her draw her hawk and waited for what he already knew was coming. With the patience of a man who had learned that the most dangerous thing you could do in any conflict while other person's timeline to become your own. He was on his own timeline. He had been on it since the day he walked away from the arena for the last time, put his championship belt in a box, and drove to a small town in Colorado to become something more difficult and more important than a fighter. He was on Lily's timeline, and nothing, not Brandon Cole, not Richard Cole, not every dollar the Cole family had ever spent on getting what they wanted, was going to change that part too. The drive home from Oak Ridge Park that afternoon was quiet in a way that had weight to it. Lily sat in the passenger seat with her notebook closed on her lap and her backpack pressed against her chest. And she did not draw, which told Logan everything he needed to know about how she was actually feeling beneath the composed expression she was wearing for his benefit. She had her mother's face when she was trying not to show something, the same careful neutrality that her mother had used in hospital waiting rooms and in difficult conversations, and in every situation where she had decided that the people around her needed her steadiness more than they needed her fear. Logan drove and said nothing for the first several minutes, because he had learned with Lily the same thing he had learned in every difficult situation he had ever been in. The wrong words at the wrong moment did not just fail to help. They actively made things worse. It was Lily who broke the silence. "That was the boy from the council meeting," she said. "The one who sat in the back with his phone out the whole time. His father was the one doing all the talking." Logan glanced at her. "You remember that?" "I remember everything," she said, in a tone that was not boastful, but simply accurate. She opened her notebook and looked at the drawing of the hawk. "His name is Brandon. I heard someone say it at the meeting. His dad kept calling him over to whisper things, and then Brandon would go make phone calls outside. You were watching all of that?" "I was bored," she said. "Drawing and watching people is what I do when I'm bored." Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What else did you notice?" Lily considered the question with the seriousness she brought to most things. His dad never looked at anybody directly when he was talking to them. He always looked a little bit to the side, like he was talking to the space next to you instead of you. She paused. "My teacher says people do that when they don't actually believe what they're saying." Logan said nothing to that. He pulled into the driveway and cut the engine and sat for a moment. "Dad," Lily said. "Yeah. You weren't scared of them." It was not a question. He thought about how to answer it. "Honestly, I was paying attention to them," he said. "That's different from not being scared." She thought about that. "What's the difference?" "Fear tells you something is dangerous," he said. "Paying attention tells you what to do about it." She looked at him for a long moment, with those eyes that had always seen more than she was supposed to see at her age. "Okay," she said. She got out of the truck and went inside. Logan sat in the driveway for a few more minutes. He pulled out his phone and looked at it. Nothing yet. He had not expected anything yet. Brandon Cole had been publicly maneuvered into backing down in front of witnesses, which meant that whatever came next would not be impulsive. It would be planned. Boys like Brandon did not absorb humiliation and let it go. They absorbed it and converted it into strategy. Because strategy was what they had been taught by fathers who won through leverage rather than force. He went inside and made dinner and listened to Lily read aloud from the field guide about red-tailed hawks. And for a few hours the afternoon felt distant and manageable. It was Gerald who called him on Monday morning. Logan was in the garage, 3/4 of the way into a transmission job on an older Silverado, when his phone rang. He answered it with one clean hand because the other was covered in grease. "You need to know something," Gerald said, without preamble, which was unusual because Gerald almost always had considerable preamble. "I had coffee this morning with Dave Kowalski. You know Dave. He's on the planning committee, and he told me that Richard Cole's people made a new move on the park development Friday night. After what happened, they filed an amended proposal with the council office. Not a change to the project, just a reclassification of the property. If it goes through, they bypass the community petition entirely." Logan set down what he was holding. "Can they do that?" "Dave says it's legally ambiguous," which is another way of saying Richard Cole's lawyers found a gap and drove a truck through it. Gerald paused. "There's more. Dave said Richard Cole's office made 3 calls Friday evening to council members. 3 out of 5. After whatever happened in the park." Logan stood up straight. "What did Brandon tell his father?" "I don't know exactly, but whatever he told him, Richard Cole decided to accelerate the timeline." Logan thought about that. He thought about Lily at the council meeting, watching Richard Cole talk to the space beside people's heads. He thought about Brandon in the park with that tight, recalibrated smile. "Thanks, Gerald," he said. He hung up and went back to the transmission for exactly 4 minutes. Then put his tools down and washed his hands. He needed to think. He had built this life on a simple principle. Solve the problem in front of you. Not the problem 3 moves ahead. Not the problem on the horizon. The problem in front of you. With the information you have, in the time you have to work with. It was a principle that had served him well in every arena he had ever competed in. And it had served him well in the quieter arena of raising a daughter alone in a small Colorado town. The problem in front of him was this. Richard Cole had decided that the normal channels of civic opposition were taking too long and had found a legal mechanism to move faster. That was one problem. The other problem was that Brandon Cole had come to the park not because he was bored, but because he had been sent there possibly explicitly, possibly just shaped by a lifetime of watching his father use pressure to clear films, and whatever Brandon had reported back about Logan's response had made Richard Cole decide to move. That meant Logan was now an obstacle. He had signed a petition and attended a meeting and had a conversation in a park. And somehow those 3 things had made him the primary target of a man who owned half the valley. He sat with that for a moment. Then he went back to work on the transmission. Because the truck needed to be finished by Wednesday, and a man's livelihood did not pause for the projects of wealthy developers. The first thing they did was the garage. Logan arrived on Tuesday morning to find the passenger window of a customer's truck smashed in. Just that one. Not every window. Not the whole garage. Not a comprehensive act of destruction. One window. Chosen specifically because it was a customer's vehicle. Not Logan's, which meant the damage fell on someone who had nothing to do with any of it. Whoever had done it, understood that the most effective pressure does not just hurt the target. It makes the target a source of harm to others. Logan photographed the damage, called the customer to explain what had happened and tell him the repair would be covered at no charge, and then called the police. The officer who came out was professional and thorough and honest with Logan about the likelihood of any meaningful result. Without witnesses or footage, the probability of identifying who had done it was low. Logan said he understood and thanked him. He fixed the window himself. He did not tell Lily what had happened. On Wednesday, 3 reviews appeared on the garage's listing online. They were written as if from real customers, with specific details that sounded plausible: a wrong part ordered, a job left incomplete, a price that had been quoted and then changed. None of it had happened. But the reviews were there, and they read convincingly. And Logan understood that the people who had written them had done enough research on his actual business practices to know what kinds of complaints were credible and what kinds would be dismissed. He reported the reviews. He responded to each one with the specific details that demonstrated they were false. He did not lose his temper in the responses. He was professional and clear, and left the reader in no doubt that the claims were fabricated. But the reviews stayed up for 6 days before they were removed. And during those 6 days, 2 people who had been planning to bring their vehicles to Logan called to ask about them. And one of those 2 people decided not to come. That was the actual cost, not the reviews themselves. The one customer who decided not to come. Logan absorbed that and moved on. On Thursday, something happened that mattered more than the window and the reviews combined. Lily came home from school with something careful in her expression, the same careful neutrality she had worn in the truck after the park, and Logan knew before she said anything that something had been said to her by someone who was not a child. He waited until after dinner. He did not push. He let her come to it in her own time, the way she always did when she was processing something. She came to his workshop doorway at 7:30, while he was rebuilding a carburetor, and stood there for a moment before she spoke. "Mrs. Alderman stopped me in the hall today," she said. Mrs. Alderman taught 4th grade. She was a decent teacher and a nervous person who responded to pressure from parents the way a compass needle responds to a nearby magnet, immediately and without apparent choice. "What did she say?" Logan asked. "She said she'd heard that there were some concerns about my home situation." She said it in this really careful way, like she was reading from something. She said, if I ever needed to talk to someone, there were resources available. Logan set down the carburetor. "Did she say who raised the concerns?" "No. But she kept saying your situation at home in this way that meant she thought something was wrong there." Lily looked at him with an expression that was harder to read than her usual ones. Something between hurt and a kind of cold, analytical anger that he recognized, because it looked exactly like his own. "Someone called the school about us, didn't they?" It was not a question. Logan crossed the workshop to where she was standing, and crouched down so he was at her eye level, the way he had when she was smaller and more easily frightened. He looked at her directly. "Yes," he said. "I think so. Because of the park. Because of what the park represents to some people." She was quiet for a moment. "Are they going to try to take me away from you?" "No," he said firmly. "No, Lily. They are not. But they're going to try something." He looked at her. He thought about lying. He thought about the version of this conversation that kept her comfortable and uninformed. He thought about it for about 3 seconds and then abandoned it, because she would see through it in approximately the same amount of time. And a lie she saw through would be worse than the truth she was already half in possession of. "Yes," he said, "they're going to try things. People who want something badly enough and have enough resources to pursue it don't stop at the first obstacle. They move to the next one. We're the obstacle they've decided to focus on right now." She absorbed that. "What do we do?" she said. "We don't do anything different," Logan said. "We get up in the morning. I go to work, you go to school. We go to the park. On Saturday, we do not change our lives because someone is applying pressure to them. That's it? That's the first part of it," he said. She was quiet again for a long moment. Then she said, "Dad, what did you do before you were a mechanic?" Logan was very still. "Why do you ask that?" he said. "Because of the way you moved in the park," she said. "I've been thinking about it since Saturday. When those guys were getting close, you stood up and walked toward them, and nobody did anything. Not because you looked scary. Because something about you made them not know what to do next." She looked at him with the direct, uncurated gaze that had always made him feel like she could see places in him that other people missed. "That's not just a dad thing. That's something else." Logan stood up. He went back to his workbench and stood there with his hands resting on the edge of it for a moment. "I'll tell you about it," he said. "But not tonight. Tonight, I need you to know that whatever happens next, you are safe. That is the only thing that matters." She accepted that. Not because she was satisfied by it, but because she trusted him, and trust, he had always believed, was not the same thing as agreement. "Okay," she said. "Good night, Dad." "Good night, Lily." She went to bed, and Logan stood in his workshop for a long time after that. Not touching anything, just standing in the quiet, with the weight of the conversation sitting on his chest. Richard Cole called him Friday afternoon. Logan had been the call. He had not been expecting it from Richard personally. But when he saw the number on his phone, he had looked up Richard Cole's office number after Gerald's call on Monday and stored it under a name that described his role rather than his identity. He answered it on the second ring. "Mr. Hayes," Richard Cole said. His voice was the voice of a man who had spent 40 years being listened to. It was measured and warm and completely without hesitation. The voice of someone who considered every word he chose to speak to be an investment rather than an expense. "I appreciate you taking my call. I want to speak with you directly, man to man, because I think some things have happened recently that neither of us wanted, and I believe we can resolve them like adults." "All right," Logan said. "I think you're a reasonable person. My sources tell me you're a good mechanic, a dedicated father, a contributing member of the community. Everything I respect. And I think that if you had more information about what my development project actually represents for Cedar Hollow, you would see it differently than you currently do." "I have the information," Logan said. "I've read the proposal. I attended the council meeting." A brief pause. "Then you know the scope of what we're proposing. The jobs, the tax revenue, the investment in the local economy." "I know what you said it would do," Logan said. "That's different from what it would actually do." Another pause. Slightly longer. "Mr. Hayes, I'm going to be straightforward with you. I know you've been involved in organizing opposition to the project. I know you signed the petition, attended the meeting, spoken to other residents. I respect that. That's your right as a citizen. But I want you to consider whether the time and energy you're spending on this is in your best interests, particularly given your personal circumstances." Logan was quiet for a moment. He heard the word that mattered in that sentence. "Particularly." "Say what you mean," Logan said. "I mean that you are a single father raising a child with a medical condition, running a one-person business in a situation that requires your full attention and your full stability. I mean that getting involved in a protracted civic dispute with individuals who have significantly more resources than you do is not a good use of what you have." He paused. "I'm not threatening you, Mr. Hayes. I want to be very clear about that. I'm offering you a perspective." "What kind of perspective comes with an offer?" Logan said. The warmth in Richard Cole's voice did not disappear. It recalibrated. The way Brandon's smile had recalibrated in the park. "There are opportunities associated with this project that might benefit someone with your skills. Construction contracts, maintenance agreements, long-term service arrangements that would significantly improve your financial position. These are real opportunities, Mr. Hayes. I'm not in the habit of offering them to people I haven't assessed carefully." Logan said nothing. Additionally, Richard Cole continued, "I have some influence over certain processes that might otherwise create complications for you. Social services inquiries, for example, business licensing reviews. Those processes can move very slowly or very quickly, depending on a great many factors. There it was. Logan had been waiting for it. He had known it was in the conversation somewhere, and he had been tracking the shape of the words, waiting for it to arrive. And now it had arrived, and he felt not anger exactly, but a clarifying cold certainty that settled over everything and made the path forward perfectly visible. "Mr. Cole," he said, "I want you to hear me very carefully." "Of course," Richard Cole said. "I am not going to withdraw my opposition to your project. I am not going to accept your contracts or your arrangements. I am not going to be moved by the mention of social services or licensing reviews or any other process you believe you have influence over." He paused. "And I am going to tell you one other thing." "Please," Richard Cole said. His voice was still warm, still measured, but something underneath it had shifted. "Whatever your son told you happened at the park on Saturday," Logan said. "He did not tell you everything. And before this is over, I think you are going to wish he had. Silence on the line. Not the silence of a man with nothing to say. The silence of a man reassessing. Have a good evening, Mr. Cole," Logan said and hung up. He stood in the garage with the phone in his hand and felt the adrenaline move through him the way it used to before bouts, not the urgent, spiking kind but the slow, clarifying kind. The kind that sharpened the edges of everything and made him feel the floor solidly under his feet. He had been retired for 3 years. He had been a father for 9 years. He had been a fighter for a decade before that. And there was a particular quality that all three of those identities shared. A quality that his coaches had identified when he was 19 and barely knew what to do with it. Logan Hayes did not panic under pressure. He settled. He became more precise, not less, and the more pressure was applied to him, the more clearly he could see exactly what he needed to do next. He put his phone in his pocket and went back to the carburetor. The rumors started the following week. Logan first heard one from a constable who brought in a Ford F-150 with brake issues and mentioned, with the slightly apologetic tone of someone relaying information they know will be unwelcome, that he had heard something from someone at the diner about Logan's past as a fighter. Not that he was a former MMA champion, that he had been involved in something violent, that there had been an incident years ago, that there was a reason he had left that world behind, and that the reason was not the reason he gave people. Logan fixed the brakes and did not comment on the rumor directly. He asked the customer where he had heard it. The customer said he could not remember exactly. It had come up in a conversation at the diner. The way things came up. The diner was the central distribution point for every piece of information in Cedar Hollow. What arrived at the diner on Tuesday morning would be at every kitchen table in town by Thursday. Logan understood this the way you understand the weather patterns of a place you have lived in for years. He went to the diner himself on Wednesday morning, which he did not do often, and sat at the counter and had coffee, and listened. It took about 20 minutes before he overheard a version of the rumor from a table behind him, told between two women who had no evident ill intent. They were simply passing along what they had heard, in the way that people do when they trust their sources without examining them. The version they were telling was more specific than what his customer had told him. It included a name for the incident, a fight, they said, in which someone had been seriously hurt. It included a vague timeline that placed it toward the end of Logan's fighting career. It included the suggestion offered carefully, with the verbal equivalent of hands raised, that there might be a reason Logan had moved to a small town where people didn't ask questions. Logan finished his coffee. He left a tip. He drove back to the garage. He called a man named Ray Costello, who had been his manager for most of his professional fighting career, who now ran a gym in Denver and had the kind of detailed personal knowledge about Logan's past that would either verify the rumors or demolish them in about 45 seconds of conversation. "Ray," he said when Costello answered, "someone's spreading a story about me. I need to know if anything in my record could be twisted to support it." Costello was quiet for about 3 seconds. Then he said, "Logan, you know your record better than I do. Clean exits on every bout. No suspensions. No investigations. Not even a formal complaint from an opponent in 10 years. You were the most controlled fighter I ever managed. And I have been managing fighters for 22 years. I know that, Logan said. I need to know if the story could survive contact with the actual record. No, Costello said flatly. It cannot. You want me to put something together? Documentation, records, the full timeline? Yes, Logan said. Send it to my email. And Ray, do it today. He hung up and looked at the carburetor in front of him and thought about the shape of the campaign being run against him. The smashed window had been about economic pressure. The fake reviews had been about professional credibility. The call to the school had been about his fitness as a parent. The phone call from Richard Cole had been about financial temptation, followed by veiled legal threat. Now the rumors at the diner were about his identity, his past. His character, the story of who he was before he came to Cedar Hollow. They were working through the list. Window, reviews, school, finances, identity. The list was not random. It was the list of a methodical person who had done this before. Someone who understood that you did not defeat a man by attacking one thing. You defeated him by attacking everything simultaneously until something gave way. Richard Cole was good at this. He was very, very good at this. But he had made one miscalculation. The same miscalculation his son had made in the park. He had looked at a quiet mechanic in a small town and decided that quiet meant manageable. That stillness meant weakness. That the absence of visible power meant the absence of any power at all. Logan Hayes had learned to be quiet the way other men learned a language. Deliberately. Over years, with the specific purpose of being effective in silence. He had not learned it because he had nothing to say. He had learned it because silence was the most disorienting thing you could present to a man who expected you to be afraid. The second thing they did hit harder than the window. Logan arrived at his garage on Friday morning to find that someone had been inside overnight. Nothing was stolen. That was the specific cruelty of it. Nothing was taken. So he could not file a theft report, could not claim any clear criminal act beyond the trespass itself. But every vehicle in the garage had been touched. Hoods were open. Panels were loose. 2 vehicles had components that had been partially disassembled and not reassembled, not damaged. Just left in a state of incompletion that would require hours of careful work to identify and correct. The message was precise. Your customers cannot trust you. Logan walked through the garage slowly, assessing everything. He called each customer whose vehicle had been touched. He explained that there had been a security incident and that he was personally verifying the condition of every vehicle before returning it. He did not tell them what kind of incident. He did not speculate about who was responsible. He kept his voice level and professional and told each person when their vehicle would be ready. Then he spent 8 straight hours in the garage, working through every car and truck, checking and rechecking, until every vehicle was in the exact condition it should have been when the customer dropped it off. He did not break for lunch. He did not check his phone, except to respond to customer messages. He worked with the precision and focus that had made him, in a different life, genuinely difficult to defeat, not because he was the strongest person in the room, but because he was almost always the most focused. At 6 in the evening, Gerald showed up at the garage door. I heard what happened, Gerald said. He was carrying 2 sandwiches in a paper bag and had the expression of a man who has decided to be useful rather than sympathetic. Eat something. Logan took a sandwich. He was starving and had not noticed until the food was in his hand. They stood in the garage doorway and ate. And Gerald talked about what he had heard from Dave Kowalski on the planning committee, and what he had heard at the diner, and what the consensus of public opinion seemed to be forming around in the wake of everything that had happening. The interesting thing, Gerald said, is that people aren't completely buying it. The rumors. I mean, Cedar Hollow is a small town, Logan. People have known you for 3 years. They've brought you their trucks. You've been at the school events. You've been at the park. When someone tells them a story about who you were before you got here, they're stacking it against who they've actually seen. And the stack doesn't add up. Logan said nothing. Chewing. That doesn't mean they won't believe it eventually if it keeps getting repeated, Gerald added. I'm just saying you have more credit in this town than Richard Cole is accounting for. Logan finished his sandwich. He doesn't care about the town's opinion of me, he said. He cares about the council vote. 5 members. He's already called 3 of them. He needs 3 votes, and he might already have them. Gerald was quiet for a moment. What's the vote scheduled for? 3 weeks, Logan said. The amended proposal. If it passes, the petition is effectively bypassed, and the development moves forward. 3 weeks, Gerald said. 3 weeks, Logan confirmed. He looked at the garage around him, the vehicles he had spent the day carefully checking, the tools on their hooks, the bay where he had rebuilt a transmission 3 days ago, while Gerald called with news that had set all of this in motion. He thought about Lily, at home right now, doing her homework or drawing birds, or reading the field guide with both careful hands. He thought about what she had asked him. Dad, what did you do before you were a mechanic? He had told her he would answer that question. He had said not tonight, but someday. He had not specified someday. He had meant when the time was right. He was beginning to think that the time was arriving faster than he had planned for, because what he was facing right now was not a mechanic's problem. It was not a civic dispute problem. It was not even a single father problem. It was a kind of problem that required a specific set of skills he had spent 3 years putting in a box. And the box, he was starting to understand, was not going to stay closed. Part 3 Louis. Vit du 4500 Thu Lin Kate Lin Mike Với Các Phân Chuk Trong Câu Chuyện. Và Hoi Thoại Tạo Thành Một Câu Chuyện Liên Mike Khi Ghép Lại. Mỗi phần Liên Mike Với Phân Chuk. Không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đâu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liên mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quang đột ngột. Không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ Hoa Kỳ, giọng văn dấu cảm xúc. Chân thực và gần gũi. Không mô tả cảnh. Tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết phần tiếp đạt điểm 10-10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện, nhanh. Sur lôi AI, Cathio noi tu ba, tung do kicting không Việt Landman. Kết thúc phần, không giới thiệu phần sau. Louis trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang mục document. Mỗi 2-3 phút cần có mini climax và đạt 10-15 mini climax mỗi phần. Cứ 10-12 phút có one twist lớn sâu sắc, dan zen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kicking. Thực tế và gần gũi, mỗi 8 phút cần có mắc dù chân khán giả. Hem đánh dấu thời gian. Louis không mô tả cảnh, không có phần gạch trong bài viết. Viết văn bản phù hợp với TTs và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nè. Part 3. The box had been in the back of Logan's closet for 3 years. It was not a large box. It was the kind of plain cardboard box you could buy at any hardware store. Unmarked on the outside, sealed with 2 strips of packing tape that he had pressed down with the flat of his hand the afternoon he had arrived in Cedar Hollow and carried inside before he even brought in the rest of his things. He had put it on the shelf in the back of his closet, behind a pair of boots he never wore, and he had not looked at it since. Lily had asked him once, when she was 7, what was in the box. He had told her it was old paperwork. She had accepted that with the trust of a child who has not yet learned to read the small hesitations in her father's answers. And he had been grateful for it, and had felt, beneath the gratitude, the specific guilt of a man who tells his daughter a true thing with the intention of it landing like an untrue one. It was not old paperwork. He went to the closet on Friday night after Gerald left, after Lily was asleep, after the house had settled into the particular silence that a house reaches round 10 o'clock, when there is only one adult in it, and that adult is alone with his thoughts. He moved the boots. He took the box off the shelf. He carried it to the kitchen table and stood in front of it for a moment, with his hands flat on the surface, and looked at it. He thought about the day he had sealed it. He had been in the apartment he and Sarah had shared, the one in Denver that still had her photography equipment in the spare room, and her handwriting on the grocery list on the refrigerator, and the specific smell of her that he had been afraid was going to disappear before he had figured out how to live without it. He had sat on the floor of the bedroom and gone through everything one last time: the belt, the gloves, The photographs, the letters from coaches and opponents, and the commissioner of the organization that had sanctioned his final championship bout, and he had put all of it in the box, and he had sealed it, and he had said, out loud to no one, that this part was over. He had meant it. He still meant it. But meaning something and being finished with it were not always the same thing. He cut the tape with his pocket knife and open-eyed to up. The belt was on top. It was heavier than most people imagined when they saw photographs of championship belts. It had the particular quality of something that was simultaneously an object and an event. You could not look at it without thinking about the night it had been placed around your waist. The sounds of the arena. The feeling of your corner man's hands on your shoulders. Logan looked at it for a moment, and then set it on the table beside the box. Underneath the belt were the gloves. Underneath the gloves were the photographs. He went through them slowly. Not with sentiment, but with the clinical attention of a man reviewing intelligence before a mission. Every photograph was a record. Every opponent he had faced. Every bout he had won. Every moment in his career that someone had thought worth capturing. He was looking for the ones that told the story he needed to tell. Because Ray Costello had sent the documentation, he had asked for every official record. Every sanctioned bout result, every medical clearance and regulatory filing from his entire professional career. It was thorough and it was accurate, and it was, by itself, not enough. Documentation told you what had happened. Photographs told you who the man was. And Logan needed people to understand both things. Because Richard Cole was attacking both things simultaneously, he found what he was looking for near the bottom of the box. 3 photographs from about 7 years ago against a fighter named Marcus Webb, who had been the reigning champion at the time, and who had come into the fight with a record that made most people regard Logan's challenge as a formality to be processed before the real business of crowning Webb for a 3rd consecutive title. In the first photograph, Logan was taking a strike to the jaw that had lifted him half off his feet. In the second, he was on one knee with the referee counting, and Marcus Webb standing 6 feet away with his arms raised. In the third, Logan was standing again, and the expression on his face was the thing he needed people to see, not anger, not desperation, not the wild-eyed urgency of a man who knew he was losing. Calm, focused, precise. The expression of a man who was already planning the next 30 seconds. He had won that fight by decision in the 5th round. He put the 3 photographs on the table beside the belt and the documentation from Ray and his phone. And he sat down and thought about what to do with all of it. He called Martha first thing Saturday morning. Martha had lived in Cedar Hollow for 31 years and had been a librarian for 22 of them, and had the particular kind of community authority that comes from being the person who helps everyone find information and never uses that access for anything other than helping. She was also, Logan had come to understand, considerably more strategically intelligent than her demeanor suggested. "I need your help," he told her. "Not just information, strategy." She was quiet for a moment. "Tell me what you have." He told her everything: the window, the reviews, the call to the school, Richard Cole's phone call, the garage intrusion, the rumors at the diner, all of it, in the sequence it had happened, with the specific detail that he had been cataloging and filing for the past 2 weeks. When he finished, Martha said, "You've been keeping records." "Yes." "Good, that was the right thing to do." She paused. "Logan, can I ask you something directly?" "Yes." "The rumors about your past, is there anything in them that is true?" "No," he said. "Not a word. I have the documentation to prove it." "Okay," she said. "Then here is what I think you need to understand. Richard Cole is not trying to destroy you. He is trying to isolate you. He wants the town to see you as a problem, as someone with a violent history and an unstable life who has attached himself to the park issue for personal reasons. If he can make that story stick, your opposition to the development becomes background noise. He doesn't need the whole town to believe it. He only needs enough uncertainty that people stop actively supporting you." Logan processed that, and the council. "The council will vote based on what they think their constituents want," Martha said. "If the constituents are uncertain about you, That uncertainty works in Richard Cole's favor. So how do I make them certain? Logan said. Martha thought for a moment. You have 3 weeks. The vote is in 3 weeks. In that time, you need to do 2 things simultaneously. You need to show the town who you actually are, not who the rumors say you are, but the specific, documented, verifiable person. And you need to give the council a reason to vote against the development. That has nothing to do with you personally. The second part, I've been working on, Logan said. Dave Kowalski has some concerns about the environmental assessment in the amended proposal. I've been reading it. He's right. Then that's your ground, Martha said. Fight the proposal on its merits. Loudly. With facts. And let people see you doing it. He thanked her and hung up and stood in the kitchen for a moment. Then he called Ray Costello back. I need more than documentation, he said. I need you to make some calls. People who fought me. People who trained with me, coaches. Anyone who can speak to what I actually was in that world. Logan, Ray said. I've been waiting for 3 years for you to need something from that world. Give me 24 hours. Lily found him at the kitchen table on Saturday afternoon, surrounded by the contents of the box. And she stood in the doorway and looked at everything, with an expression he could not immediately read. Then she walked to the table and picked up the championship belt with both hands. It was clearly heavier than she expected. She adjusted her grip. She turned it over and looked at the inscription on the back. She set it down carefully. She looked at the photographs. She looked at the one where he was on one knee with the referee counting. She looked at the one with the expression on his face in the 5th round. She picked that one up and held it at arm's length, studying it, the way she studied the birds she drew with complete attention, trying to see what was actually there rather than what she expected to see. This is you, she said. Yes, you were going to lose. It looked that way. But you didn't. No. She set the photograph down and sat in the chair across from him. She folded her hands on the table in a way that reminded him so sharply of her mother that he had to look at the belt for a second instead of her face. Tell me, she said. So he did. He told her about the beginning the gym in Denver when he was 19. The trainer who had spotted something in the way he moved and had offered him 6 months of serious training to see if it was real. He told her about the early fights, the ones he had lost, the ones he had won, the slow accumulation of skill and discipline that had eventually made him someone worth watching. He told her about the coaches who had shaped him, about Ray Costello, who had managed his career with the combination of business acumen and gen care that was rarer in that world than most people knew. He told her about the championship. He told her about her mother. He told her how he had met Sarah at a fundraiser. 3 months after winning his SEC title, she had been photographing the event and had taken a picture of him that he had not known she was taking, and she had sent it to him afterward because she thought he might want it. And in the photograph, he looked like someone who was genuinely, quietly happy, and he had called her to thank her for the photo and had kept calling for reasons that had nothing to do with photography. He told her how Sarah had felt about the fighting. She had not loved it, but she had respected it because she understood the discipline it required and the honesty of a contest where the only thing that mattered was what you actually were. He told her about the accident. He kept that part brief. It was a freeway, a wet road, a driver who had not been paying attention. He told her what he needed to tell her, which was the fact of it, and left out the parts that still lived in him, in places language could not easily reach. He told her about the box, how he had sealed it and brought it here and put it in the closet because he had needed to become someone different. And becoming someone different sometimes required a specific boundary between who you were and who you were becoming. Lily listened to all of it without interrupting, which was how she listened to everything that mattered. When he was done, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "So the man in the park, the one on his knee about to lose, who won anyway?" She pointed at the photograph. "That's still you." "Yes," Logan's. "Good," she said, "because I think we need him." The first call from Ray Costello's campaign came in on Sunday evening. Marcus Webb called from his home in Atlanta and left a voicemail message that was 22 seconds long and contained more character than most speeches Logan had heard. He said he had fought Logan Hayes twice and would fight him a third time if the man was willing, and that in 20 years of professional fighting he had never shared a ring with anyone he respected more. He said he would put that in writing. In public, anywhere it needed to be. Because a man's reputation was a thing worth defending, and the people spreading stories about Logan Hayes had apparently never met the actual Logan Hayes. Ray called after the voicemail. Marcus is the first, he said. I've got 2 coaches. His former sparring partner from his title years, and the commissioner who sanctioned his last 3 championship bouts, all willing to speak publicly, all willing to go on record. Logan exhaled slowly. That's more than I need. It's exactly what you need, Ray said. Logan, why didn't you tell anyone in that town who you were? Because it wasn't relevant, Logan said. It's relevant now. Yes, Logan said. It is. He hung up and looked at the belt on the table. He had not put it back in the box. He was not going to put it back in the box. The twist came on Monday morning, and it came from a direction Logan had not been watching. He was in the garage when a woman he did not recognize walked in. She was in her mid-40s, professionally dressed in a way that was understated rather than showy, and she carried herself with the economy of movement of someone who had learned to conserve energy for things that actually required it. She introduced herself as Patricia Ewan. She was an investigative journalist with a regional news outlet based in Denver that covered local government and development issues across the Mountain West. She said she had been tracking Richard Cole's development projects for 8 months. Logan set down his tools. Sit down, he said. She sat on the stool beside the workbench and opened a folder she had been carrying under her arm. I've been looking at 3 projects in 3 different small Colorado towns where Richard Cole's company has pushed through development proposals over community opposition, she said. In all 3 cases, there were individuals who led or organized the local opposition. In all 3 cases, those individuals experienced a similar pattern of pressure business disruption, personal reputation attacks, social services inquiries, sometimes legal interference. Logan looked at the folder. You have documentation. I have a pattern, she said. What I don't have is someone in the middle of it right now who is willing to talk on record. Logan looked at her. He had learned to read people in the specific way that extended time in competitive environments teaches you to read them looking past the surface performance, the actual structure underneath. Patricia Ewan was not performing. She had the particular stillness of someone who had already decided what she believed, and was now looking for evidence to test that belief against. Tell me one thing first, he said. Why come to me now? Because the council vote is in 3 weeks, she said, and because I've been watching what's been done to you for the past 2 weeks, and I think you're the most intact person I've come across in 8 months of this story. She paused. Also because Gerald Watkins told me you were someone worth talking to. Logan almost smiled. What do you need from me? He said. Everything, she said. Start at the beginning. He told her the same sequence he had told Martha, with the addition of the documentation from Ray and the dates and specific details he'd been recording since the smashed window. She took notes in a notebook with the speed and accuracy of someone who had been doing this for a long time. She asked questions that were precise and useful, the kind of questions that told him she already understood the architecture of what she was hearing and was filling in the specific materials. When he reached the account of Richard Cole's phone call, she looked up from her notes. He mentioned social services directly, she said. He called it a social services inquiry, Logan said. He said those processes could move very slowly or very quickly, depending on a great many factors. She wrote something. And the call to Lily's school, Thursday of the first week. Mrs. Alderman, 4th grade teacher. She did not say who had called, but the language she used with Lily, your situation at home, was specific in a way that suggested it had been framed for her. Patricia looked at him for a moment. Mr. Hayes, I need to ask you something that I ask everyone in this situation. And I need you to answer it honestly, regardless of how it lands. Go ahead. Is there anything in your background, anything at all, that Richard Cole's people could use legitimately? Not rumors, not fabrications. Actual history that could be framed in a damaging way? Logan thought about the championship belt on his kitchen table. He thought about the photographs. He thought about the bout against Marcus Webb, where he had been on his knee with the referee counting. My background is in professional MMA, he said. I competed for 10 years. I won 2 championships. I retired 3 years ago after my wife died and came here to raise my daughter. Patricia absorbed that. Something shifted in her expression, not surprise exactly, but a recalibration. Nobody here knows that, she said. Very few people, he confirmed. And the rumors going around the diner are fabrications built around the fact of my fighting history, he said. They took the fact and invented events around it that never happened. I have complete documentation of my entire professional record through my former manager. Everything is on record with the sanctioning body. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Logan had not expected. Mr. Hayes, she said, the story of who you actually are is more powerful than anything Richard Cole is trying to make people believe about you. I think you know that. The question is whether you're willing to use it. Logan looked at the folder she had closed on her lap. What does using it look like, he said. It looks like you, she said. On record. Publicly. Before the council vote. Not as a rebuttal to the rumors, but as the truth that was always there. He was quiet for a long time. He thought about the box in his closet. He thought about the tape he had pressed down with the flat of his hand 3 years ago and said out loud that this part was over. He thought about Lily saying, the man in the park, the one on his knee about to lose. Who won anyway? That's still you. All right, he said. Let's talk about what that looks like. He did not tell Lily about Patricia Ewan immediately. He needed to think through the shape of what he was about to do before he explained it to her. Because Lily had the quality of asking the questions that cut directly to the thing he had not fully worked out yet. And he needed to have worked it out before he was confronted with those questions. He thought about it through Monday afternoon and into the evening. And what he kept coming back to was not the strategy of it. He understood the strategy. It was clear, and it was sound, but the personal cost of it. He had built his life in Cedar Hollow on the quiet. He had built it on being Logan the mechanic, Lily's dad, the man who fixed your truck and showed up to the town council meeting and signed the petition and kept his head down and did not ask for more than he had. That version of himself had been the most honest version he had ever lived. It was not a performance. It was a genuine simplification. A life reduced to its essential elements: his daughter, his work, his community, and every complication he had removed from it had been a deliberate choice. What Patricia was asking him to do was reintroduce every complication at once. He thought about his wife. He thought about what Sarah would have said. She would have said, "Logan, the simplification was always temporary. You knew that." She would have said, "You can't protect Lily by being smaller than you are. You tried that. Look what it got you." She would have said, "Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is pretend you don't have the tools you have." He went to the room and knocked on the doorframe. She was at her desk, drawing. She looked up. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "You're going to tell people who you were," she said. He stopped. "How did you know?" She turned back to her drawing. "Because it's the right thing to do, and you always eventually do the right thing. You just take a while to get there." She added a line to the drawing. "Also, I heard you in the kitchen last night after I was supposed to be asleep." Logan stood in the doorframe for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said, "about keeping it from you. The box, all of it." Lily set her pencil down. She turned to face him fully. And there was something in her expression that was older than 9 years, and that he recognized as that thing that happened to children who had experienced real loss. They grew a layer of seriousness that their peers did not have. A layer that was not heaviness but depth. "Dad," she said, "you were trying to give me a normal life. I know that. That was a good thing. Even if it didn't completely work." She paused. "But I'm 9. Not 5. I can handle knowing who my father is. Logan was quiet for a moment.
Yes.
You can. He came in and sat on the edge of her bed. And she turned her chair to face him, and he told her the rest of what he had not told her on Saturday. The parts, what the fighting had actually required of him. The discipline and the sacrifice and the specific practice of learning to be precisely as much as you needed to be, and not 1 degree more. He told her that the quality she had noticed in the park, the quality that had made those young men not know what to do next, was not aggression and was not intimidation. It was the absence of uncertainty. It was the product of 10 years of learning exactly what you were capable of, so that in the moment when it mattered, you did not have to wonder. That's what you're going to bring to this, Lily said. Yes. Good, she said. She turned back to her desk and picked up her pencil. Tell Gerald I said hi. The week that followed moved at a pace that Logan had not experienced since the last months of his fighting career. When everything happened at once, and the only way through was to stop trying to slow it down and simply move with it. Patricia's first article ran on Wednesday. It was not the full story that was coming, but it was the opening move. A piece that documented the pattern of Richard Cole's development projects across 3 Colorado communities, naming the towns and the projects and the individuals who had been targeted and the specific tactics that had been used in each case. It was thorough, and it was scrupulously sourced, and it was the kind of reporting that did not tell people what to think, but gave them enough information that thinking was unavoidable. It ran online Wednesday morning and was being shared in Cedar Hollow by noon. Logan did not read the comments. He never read the comments. But Martha called him at 2 in the afternoon to report that the reaction at the library, which functioned as a secondary distribution point for local information, had been significant. People are angry, she said. Not at you, at the pattern. Good, Logan said on Thursday. Marcus Webb's written statement appeared in the same publication, alongside statements from 2 of Logan's former coaches and the commissioner who had sanctioned his title fights. The statements were specific and personal, and used language that was not the language of official documents, but of actual people who had known Logan Hayes in a context most of Cedar Hollow had not known existed. Marcus Webb's statement ended with a line that Gerald read to Logan over the phone because Logan had still not read it himself. Gerald read it twice, slowly to make sure Logan heard it. Marcus Webb had written, I have been hit by Logan Hayes more times than I can count. I have never once felt that he enjoyed it. That is the rarest thing in our sport. And it is why I will stand beside his character without hesitation. Logan was quiet on the phone for a moment. All right, he said. All right, Gerald said. Logan, that is a remarkable thing for a man to say about another man. I know, Logan said. Tell Dave Kowalski I need to talk to him about the environmental assessment. Today if possible. I'll call him now, Gerald said. Logan hung up and looked at the championship belt, which had been on his kitchen table since Friday night, and which he had still not put back in the box. He thought it might be time for it to be somewhere else entirely. He thought it might be time for it to be seen. Because the campaign against him had been built on a version of his past that was not true. And the best response to a false version was not a denial. The best response was the truth, delivered with the same precision and the same absence of uncertainty that had made him. In another life, someone you did not underestimate. He had been quiet for 3 years, because quiet was what the situation required. The situation had changed. He picked up the belt and turned it over in his hands one more time and felt the weight of it, not the physical weight, but the other kind, the weight of everything it represented. Every hour in the gym, every bout won and lost, every moment of discipline and sacrifice that had made him capable of what he was capable of. He set it back down. He picked up his phone and called Patricia Ewan. I'm ready for the full interview, he said. I want it before the council vote. I want people to know the whole story. When can you do it? She said. Tomorrow, he said. Come to the garage. Bring your camera. He hung up and stood in his kitchen and felt something he had not felt in 3 years, not anger. Not fear, not even the particular resolve of a man who has decided to fight back. He felt the specific clarity of a man who has stopped pretending he is something less than what he is, and who has finally decided to stand in his full height, look directly at what is coming, and let it come. He was done being small. He had never actually been small. And in 9 days, the town of Cedar Hollow was going to understand exactly who had been living quietly in their valley for 3 years, fixing their trucks and raising his daughter and waiting, without knowing he was waiting for the moment that required him to be completely and entirely himself. Patricia Yoon arrived at the garage at 9 in the morning with a photographer named Dennis and a digital recorder she set on the workbench between herself and Logan without ceremony. She did not ask him to change his clothes or move to a better location or do anything that would make what followed look like anything other than what it was, a man in his workplace, telling the truth.
Dennis took photographs while they talked.
Logan did not look at the camera. He had learned a long time ago that the moment you started performing for the lens was the moment the lens stopped capturing anything real. Patricia started with the belt. Logan had brought it from the kitchen table and set it on the corner of the workbench before they arrived. She looked at it for a moment, then looked at him. "Tell me about the night you won that," she said. And Logan talked. He talked for 90 minutes. He told Patricia everything he had told Lily, and then the things he had not told Lily because they belonged to the adult version of the story, the specific economics of professional fighting, the physical cost of it, the way your body keeps a ledger of every bout you have ever competed in and presents the bill incrementally over years. He talked about his coaches and his opponents and the specific fight against Marcus Webb, where he had been on his knee watching the referee's count and had made the decision, in that moment, not to think about winning, but to think about the next 10 seconds. Because the next 10 seconds were the only thing that existed. He talked about Sarah. He talked about her the way he had never talked about her publicly, with the specific detail that makes a person real to someone who never knew them. He talked about her laugh and her work, and the way she had held Lily when Lily was born and looked at him over the baby's head, with an expression that had no word for it in English. An expression that meant something like, "Look what we made. Look what is possible. Look at this." He talked about the accident. He kept it short. He said what needed to be said. He talked about the box. He talked about Cedar Hollow. He talked about 3 years of Saturday mornings at Oak Ridge Park and a daughter who drew birds with both hands and remembered everything and had looked at a championship photograph and said, "That's still you." When he finished, Patricia sat with her notebook closed for a moment. Then she said, "I want to ask you about what has happened in the last 2 weeks. I want you to walk me through all of it on record." He did. He was specific, and he was sequential, and he was completely calm. Because the most effective testimony is testimony that does not require the listener to manage the speaker's emotion while also absorbing the facts. He laid out the window, the reviews, the school call, Richard Cole's phone call, the garage intrusion, the diner rumors. He named what he had documentation for and distinguished it clearly from what he had observed and concluded. He told Patricia that he had records of everything and that she was welcome to verify any of it independently. She said she already had. Dennett took one final photograph as Logan was finishing. Later, when Logan saw the photograph in the published article, he understood why Dennis had waited for that specific moment. He had not been posing. He had not been performing. He had been looking slightly to the side of the camera, in the middle of a sentence, with the championship belt in the background, and the garage around him, and his hands resting on the workbench the way they rested there every working day. He looked exactly like what he was, a man in his own space, completely at ease with the full weight of his own history. The article went live on Friday evening, 48 hours before the council vote. Logan did not read it when it published. He asked Martha to read it and call him. She called at 7:15, and her voice had the quality it had when she was moved by something and was managing it carefully. "It's everything," she said. "Logan, it is genuinely everything." "Is it accurate?" he said. "Completely," she said. And it reads the way your voice sounds, like someone who is not trying to convince you of anything, just telling you what is. Good, he said. The belt photograph, she said. Dennis got something remarkable. I know, he said. He had looked at it once. Once was enough. He asked her about the council. She said she had spoken to Dave Kowalski that afternoon. And Dave had told her that the reaction to Patricia's earlier article about Richard Cole's pattern had been significant enough that 2 of the 3 council members Richard had contacted were now publicly uncommitted on. The vote, not opposed, not committed, uncommitted, which in the language of local politics meant they were watching which way the wind was blowing. And the wind, Logan said, is blowing toward you, Martha said. He thanked her and hung up and went to check on Lily. She was asleep. She had read 3 chapters of the field guide before bed and left it open on her nightstand to a page about migration patterns. Logan closed it gently and set it on the nightstand and stood in the doorway for a moment, listening to her breathe. Easy, steady, deep, good. He went to bed himself and slept better than he had in 2 weeks. Brandon Cole called Logan's cell phone at 6:45 Saturday morning. Logan was awake. He was always awake by 6. He looked at the number, which he recognized because he had looked up Richard Cole's office number and stored it. And the call was coming from a different number. But the area code and exchange were the same family of numbers, he answered. Mr. Hayes. Brandon's voice was different from the voice at the park. The performance was gone. What was left underneath it was something younger and less certain. And Logan noted that without satisfaction, because there was nothing satisfying about watching a young man discover that the world was larger and more serious than he had been allowed to believe. I need to talk to you. You're talking, Logan said. A pause. I read the article. All right. I didn't know he'd done all of that. The garage, the school, the reviews online. Another pause. Longer this time. I knew he was going to push back on the park thing. I didn't know he was doing all of that. Logan was quiet for a moment. He thought about what Lily had said about Richard Cole at the council meeting. He always looked a little bit to the side, like he was talking to the space next to you instead of you. Brandon, he said, what do you want? I want to. He stopped, started again. I want you to know that what happened in the park, that was me being an idiot. That was not nobody told me to do that. That was me trying to impress my father by showing him I could handle something. And I made it into something it didn't need to be. He paused. Lily's medication. I didn't know Kevin had it. When I figured out what was in the bag, I told him to drop it. Logan remembered the broad-shouldered one, dropping the bag with the slightly confused expression of a person who had not consciously decided to drop it. He filed this new information against that memory. You called the school, Logan said. No. Fast and certain. No, that was my father. I didn't know about it until after the garage. No, I don't know who did that. I think it was people my father hired. I don't know their names. I wasn't involved. Logan stood in his kitchen and looked at the championship belt that was still on the table. Brandon, he said, why are you calling me? The long pause this time was the pause of a young man trying to locate the honest version of an answer, in a place where honesty had not recently been practiced. Because the vote is tomorrow, Brandon said. And because I think what my father is doing is wrong. And because I read what Marcus Webb wrote about you, and I started thinking about the fact that you let Kevin drop that bag without doing anything to him. And you could have, and you didn't. And I don't know. He stopped. I don't know what I want from this call. I just needed to make it. Logan thought about that. Where is your father right now? He said. He left for Denver last night. He has a meeting with the council liaison this morning. He's trying to shore up the votes. And you? I'm here, Brandon said, in Cedar Hollow. I've been here all week. I know, Logan said. He did not explain how he knew. He had been paying attention. He had been paying attention to everything. Mr. Hayes, Brandon said, is there anything I can do to make any of this right? Logan looked at the belt. He thought about the box, with the tape cut, and all its contents spread across the table in the kitchen where he and his daughter had sat, and he had told her the whole truth of himself for the first time. "Yes," he said. "There's something you can do." He told Brandon what it was. Brandon was quiet for a long moment after Logan finished. Then he said, "If I do that, my father will never forgive me." "I know," Logan said. "Okay," Brandon said. He hung up. The Cedar Hollow Town Council met in the municipal building on Sycamore Street at 2 in the afternoon on Sunday. The meeting room held approximately 60 people at full capacity. By 1:30, there were people standing in the hallway outside the door. And by the time the council called the session to order at 2 o'clock, exactly, the building was fuller than it had been for any meeting in anyone's recent memory. Logan arrived at 1:50 with Gerald on his left and Martha on his right, which was not a formation they had discussed or arranged, but which had come together naturally in the parking lot, in the way that things come together when people have a shared purpose. He was wearing the same clothes he wore to work every day. He had not dressed for the occasion, because the occasion was not about how he looked. It was about what he said and whether the things he said were true. And both of those were going to be exactly the same, regardless of what he was wearing. Lily was not there. He had asked Martha's daughter to stay with her at their house. Lily had objected, not loudly but clearly, in the way she objected to most things she had opinions about directly, and without drama, simply stating her position. Logan had told her that he needed to know she was safe so he could focus on needed focusing on. She had thought about that, decided it was a reasonable request, and accepted it. She had given him the field guide to carry. He had looked at her, and she had said, "For good luck." He had put it in his jacket pocket, and he could feel the shape of it now as he walked into the council room. The 5 council members sat at the front table. 4 of them Logan recognized from the earlier meeting and from various civic interactions over 3 years. The 5th was a newer member named Carol Tran, who had been appointed to fill a vacancy the previous fall and whom Logan had spoken to twice, once at a library event and once when she had brought her SUV to the garage with a brake issue he had resolved in under an hour. Richard Cole was seated in the front row of the public gallery. He was in a dark suit and he was utterly composed. The composure of a man who has made his moves and is waiting for the board to confirm what he already knows. He looked at Logan when Logan entered the room. Logan looked back. Neither of them said anything. 2 rows behind Richard Cole, Brandon Cole sat alone. Richard Cole had not seen his son yet. Brandon was sitting very still, looking at his hands. The council chair opened the meeting and summarized the item on the agenda. The amended development proposal filed by Cole Properties, the reclassification of the target land, and the public comment period that would precede the vote. Richard Cole's attorney spoke first. He was concise and professional and presented the amended proposal as a straightforward exercise in regulatory process. The reclassification was legally sound. The environmental assessment had been updated. The economic projections had been independently verified. He had a prepared packet that he distributed to the council members and to the room. Logan sat and listened and took no notes because he did not need notes. When the attorney finished, the council chair opened public comment. The first 3 speakers were community members. Logan knew a woman who had brought her children to the park every summer for 12 years. A retired postal worker who had organized the original petition. A young man who taught at the elementary school and had taken his class to the park 3 times in the past year as part of a nature curriculum. They spoke well and they spoke from genuine feeling. And Logan watched the council members as they listened and saw what he needed to see. The 2 uncommitted members were leaning forward slightly, which was the physical language of people who were still deciding. Then Richard Cole stood up. He did not wait for his turn. The council chair started to say something, and Richard Cole said, with the council's indulgence, in a tone that made it clear indulgence was not actually what he was requesting. And he walked to the front of the room and turned to face the gallery. He was very good. Logan had expected him to be very good. And he was. He spoke about the town's future. He spoke about economic opportunity and the limitations of sentiment as a guide to policy. He acknowledged the community's attachment to the park with a warmth that sounded genuine and was probably not. He referenced job creation numbers and tax revenue projections with the fluency of someone who had made this speech in various forms many times before. Then he said something that changed the temperature of the room. "I want to address something directly," Richard Cole said, "because I believe the public conversation around this proposal has been complicated by the involvement of an individual whose motivations and background deserve scrutiny." He paused. He was looking at the council, not at Logan. "There has been a narrative presented in the press this week about the conduct of my company. I want to be clear that this narrative was shaped and promoted by a person with a history of violence, who moved to this town under circumstances that the community was not made aware of. The room was very quiet. I am not questioning this individual's right to live here," Richard Cole continued. "But I am questioning the judgment of a community that allows the civic process to be hijacked by someone whose past includes professional combat at the highest levels, someone who, as recently as 2 weeks ago, used physical intimidation against a group of young men in this very park." Logan felt Gerald tense beside him. He put his hand briefly on Gerald's arm. "Not yet." Richard Cole finished and sat down. The council chair asked if there were further public comments. Logan stood up. He walked to the front of the room with the field guide in his jacket pocket and the championship belt. No, not the belt. He had left that on the table. He did not need it here. It was already in the article, already in the public record, already in the hands of every person in this room who had read what Patricia had written. What he brought to the front of the room was himself. He stood at the front and he looked at the council members. And then he turned slightly and looked at the room. "My name is Logan Hayes," he said. "I have lived in Cedar Hollow for 3 years. I run a garage on Millbrook Road. My daughter Lily is 9 years old and attends Cedar Hollow Elementary and has been coming to Oak Ridge Park every Saturday since we moved here." He paused. "Richard Cole is correct that I have a history as a professional MMA fighter. He is correct that I competed at a high level. He is incorrect about almost everything else," he said. He took out his phone. He had the documentation from Ray Costello pulled up. And he read from it, not all of it, just the specific parts that addressed directly the claims Richard Cole had implied. His record, his regulatory history, his clean exits, the statement from the sanctioning commissioner. He read Marcus Webb's line. He read it exactly once, without comment. Then he put the phone away. "2 weeks ago," he said, "a group of young men came to Oak Ridge Park and took my daughter's backpack. Inside that bag was her emergency inhaler. My daughter has asthma. The bag was held over her head while she tried to reach it." He paused. "I asked for the bag back. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten anyone. I did not touch anyone." Another pause. "The bag was returned. I took my daughter and I left." He looked at Richard Cole. "What happened after that is documented in a regional publication, and I will not rehash it here. The council has read it. The room has read it." He looked back at the council members. "I am not here to talk about myself. I am here to talk about this park and what it means to this town. Because the truth of who I am and the truth of what Oak Ridge Park means to Cedar Hollow are the same kind of truth. They are both things that were here, quietly, before anyone thought to question them, and they are both things worth protecting." He sat down. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Carol Tran, the newest council member, said, "I have a question for the public commenter." Logan looked at her. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "you brought your vehicle to my garage, I mean." "I brought my vehicle to your garage last fall." "Brake issue." "Yes," Logan said. "November. Front rotors." "You stayed 2 hours late to finish it because I needed the car the next morning," she said. "Yes." "You didn't charge me for the extra time. You had a child who needed to be picked up from school. It was the right thing to do." Carol Tran nodded slowly. She looked at her notepad. Then she looked at Richard Cole. Then she looked back at Logan. "Thank you," she said. "That's all I needed." What happened next was the thing Logan had not planned for, because he had not known it was coming. Brandon Cole stood up. Richard Cole in his seat and looked at his son with the expression of a man who has opened a door, expecting one room and found another entirely. "I want to make a public comment," Brandon said to the council chair. The council chair looked at Richard Cole, then at Brandon, then said, "You are recognized." Brandon walked to the front of the room. He did not look at his father as he passed him. He stood at the front with his hands at his sides, and he was clearly nervous visibly. Unmistakably nervous in a way that Logan recognized as the nervousness of someone doing something that will cost them, and who has decided the cost is acceptable. "My name is Brandon Cole," he said. "Richard Cole is my father." He paused. He looked at the floor for exactly 1 second, then looked back up. "I was in Oak Ridge Park 2 weeks ago with some of my friends. I was there because I was trying to demonstrate to my father that I could handle a problem he was concerned about. The problem being Logan Hayes and his opposition to the development. The room was very still. What happened in the park was my doing, not anyone's instruction. I made choices in that park that I regret. Specifically, one of my friends ends a backpack that belonged to Mr. Hayes's daughter. I did not stop that immediately, and I should have. When I understood what was in the bag, I did stop it, but the delay was wrong." He swallowed. "I am saying this on the record because the account that has been in circulation about that day, the account my father's people have been circulating, is not accurate, Mr. Hayes did not threaten anyone. He did not initiate anything physical. He asked for his daughter's bag back. We gave it back. That is what happened." Richard Cole said, quietly but audibly, "Brandon." Brandon did not look at him. "I have also become aware," Brandon continued, "that my father's company has engaged in activities over the past 2 weeks that I was not informed of and that I do endorse. The call to the elementary school, the online reviews, the incident at the garage." He paused. "I cannot speak to my father's legal exposure on those matters. That is for others to determine. I can speak to the fact that I knew none of it was happening, and that if I had, I would have said what I am saying now, which is that it was wrong." He looked at the council members. "I grew up with this project," he said. "My father has been talking about Cedar Hollow development for 3 years. I believed in it because he believed in it, and because I didn't look closely enough at what believing in it required of the people who were in the way." He paused. "I'm asking the council to vote against the amended proposal. Not because the original project had no merit, but because the process that brought this amendment here was not a clean process, and approving it would be approving the process along with the proposal." He walked back to his seat. He sat down 2 rows behind his father. Richard Cole did not turn around. The room was absolutely silent for a long moment. Then Gerald, from 2 seats down from Logan, said under his breath, "Well, I did not see that coming." Logan said nothing. He was watching Richard Cole's back, the set of the man's shoulders, the stillness of a person who has just watched something they built for a long time come apart in a public room and is managing the experience entirely internally. He had seen that kind of stillness before, in opponents, after a bout they had been certain they were going to win. It was not a pleasant thing to witness in any human being, but it was what it was. The council went into closed session for 40 minutes. The public gallery did not empty. People stood in groups or sat where they were and talked in the tones of people who have just witnessed something that requires processing. Logan sat with Gerald and Martha. Gerald talked. Martha was quiet. Logan watched the closed door at the front of the room. Richard Cole left the public gallery during the closed session. He walked out through the main door without speaking to anyone. Brandon remained in his seat. He was looking at his phone, or appearing to look at it, in the way people use phones as a thing to look at when they do not know what else to do with their eyes. At one point, Logan walked back to where Brandon was sitting. Brandon looked up. "You didn't have to do that," Logan said. "Yeah, I did," Brandon said. He looked back at his phone. "Will you let me know how it comes out? I'm going to go. I can't be in the room when they come back." "I'll text you," Logan said. Brandon nodded. He got up and left through the side door. Logan went back to his seat. Gerald said, "Was that what you asked him to do? On the phone this morning?" "Yes," Logan said. What exactly did you say to him? I told him that if he knew things that were true and relevant, and he kept them to himself to protect his father, then whatever happened afterward would be something he had chosen, Logan said. I told him that was his right, but that he should be clear about the choice he was making. Gerald considered that. That's a more sophisticated thing to say to a 23-year-old than most people would manage. He's not stupid, Logan said. He's been taught to prioritize the wrong things. That's different. Martha, who had been quiet this whole time, said, Sarah would have liked you. Logan looked at her. She looked back, steady and unembarrassed. She would have liked watching you do this, Martha said. That's all. Logan looked at the closed door at the front of the room. Yeah, he said. She would have had opinions about the strategy. Better or worse than yours? Logan thought about it. Better, he said, faster. 2. Martha smiled. It was a small smile and it was real. They waited. The council returned at 3:52. The chair called the session back to order and the room reseated itself in about 20 seconds, which was the fastest Logan had ever seen 60 people move at once. The chair said that the council had reviewed the amended proposal, the public comments, and the documentary material that had been entered into the public record, including Patricia Yuen's published reporting and the supporting documentation from Logan's professional history. He said that the council had also taken note of the public comment from Brandon Cole and had, in closed session, discussed its implications for the integrity of the process by which the amended proposal had been filed. He looked at the 4 other council members. Each of them gave a small, confirming nod, he said. The amended proposal filed by Cole Properties is denied. The denial is based on procedural grounds, specifically evidence of improper influence in the amendment process, and on environmental grounds, citing deficiencies in the updated assessment identified by 2 council members in advance of today's session. He paused. The original proposal remains under community petition review. That process will continue through its normal channels. The room reacted, not with chaos, with the particular sound of a large group of people yelling simultaneously, and then beginning to talk, quietly, and then less quietly, the sound of a community that has been holding its breath and has been given permission to stop. Gerald grabbed Logan's arm above the elbow. The grip of a man who wants to communicate something he does not have immediate words for. Martha said, quietly, there it is. Logan sat very still for a moment. He thought about the box with the tape cut. He thought about the photograph of himself on one knee with the referee counting. He thought about the field guide in his jacket pocket, which he had carried through the entire afternoon without thinking about it, and which he now took out and held in both hands, the way Lily held it every time she moved it. He thought about Sarah. He thought about her for a long time, sitting in that room while the sound of 60 people processing a collective relief moved around him like weather. He thought, I protected it, Sarah. The park is still there. The Saturday mornings are still there. The birds are still coming back every season. He thought, Lily is going to be all right. He stood up. He thanked Gerald and Martha. He shook hands with the 2 uncommitted council members who had voted against the proposal. He nodded at Carol Tran, who nodded back with an expression that did not require any words to be complete. He walked out of the municipal building into the late afternoon. He took out his phone and texted Brandon Cole 2 words. It passed. He waited. Brandon texted back 1 word. Good. Logan looked at the word for a moment. Then he put his phone in his pocket and got in his truck. He had a daughter to go get. He had told her the whole truth of himself. Finally, completely, without reservation, and the truth had turned out to be exactly what was needed. Not the fighting. Not the championship. Not the belt or the photographs or the opponent's testimonials. The truth of who he was beneath all of that. A man who had learned the hardest thing a person who is capable of force can learn. That restraint is not weakness. That silence is not retreat. That the most powerful thing you can do in any room is walk into it knowing exactly what you are and refusing to pretend otherwise. He drove to Martha's daughter's house. He parked. Before he could get to the front, it opened, and Lily came out carrying her notebook and her backpack, and the expression of someone who already knew. Because she had known before he left that morning. Because she understood the shape of things in a way that had always been slightly beyond her years. "Well?" she said. "The vote went our way," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "Oak Ridge Park is still ours." "Oak Ridge Park is still ours," he said. She nodded once, satisfied, and walked to the truck and got in. Logan stood on the front walk for a moment and looked at the evening sky above the mountains. The particular blue of Colorado at 6 o'clock in late spring. The blue that had a quality he had never been able to fully describe, but which had been, for 3 years, the specific color of the life he had chosen. He had not realized, until this moment, that choosing it had been its own kind of fight, and that he had been winning it quietly the whole time. Part 5 Louis. Viet du 5000 từ liên kết liên mike với các phần trước trong câu chuyện. Và hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liên mike khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liên mike với phần trước. Không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liên mike. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề. Tránh ngắt quang đột ngột. Không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện mi hoa kỳ, giọng văn dấu cảm xúc. Chân thực và gần gũi. Không mô tả cảnh. Tập trung vào hành động cảm xúc và tâm lý nhân vật. Viết và 5 đạt điểm 10-10 và bổ sung tiết tấu câu chuyện, nhanh. Sur lối từ ngôi thứ 3. Judo kick. Tình không viết lan man. Kết thúc zoom câu khẳng định mạnh để khép lại câu chuyện rõ ràng trọn vẹn. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin ăn không nhảy sang mục document. Mỗi 2-3 phút cần có mini climax và đạt 10-15 mini climax mỗi phần. Cứ 10-12 phút có one twist lớn sâu sắc, dan zen mini cliffhanger mạnh hơn. Tăng tính tự nhiên cho phản ứng của các nhân vật, thêm nhịp điệu kịch tính. Thực tế và gần gũi,
Content có mọc giữa chân hành giả.
lưu ý không mô tả cảnh. Viết văn bản phù hợp với TTS và chỉ cần viết nội dung và viết đúng lệnh nha. Part 5. The drive home from Martha's daughter's house took 11 minutes. And for most of those 11 minutes, neither Logan nor Lily said anything. Which was the kind of silence that does not need to be filled because it is already full of something. Lily had her notebook open on her lap. She was not drawing. She was looking at a drawing she had already made, the red-tailed hawk from the pond. The one she had been watching the afternoon. Everything started. Caught in the posture of the moment, before it dove. She had the pencil in her hand, but she was not using it. She was just looking at the drawing the way you look at something when you are thinking about something else entirely. Logan kept his eyes on the road. "Dad," she said. "About 3 minutes from home." "Yeah. What happens now?" "To the park. To Mr. Cole." He thought about how to answer that honestly. The original proposal is still in the petition review process. That could take months. Cole Properties could file again with a different approach, so it's not over. The vote today was a win, he said. Wins matter, but they're not always final. She absorbed that, and Mr. Cole himself? That depends on what Patricia's reporting uncovers, Logan said. And on whether other people in those 3 towns Patricia mentioned decide to come forward. And on whether the people whose names are on the things that were done to us decide to be honest about who told them to do it. Lily was quiet for a moment. "Brandon?" "Possibly," Logan said. What he said today was significant. Whether he's willing to say more. To investigators or in a legal context. That's his choice to make. Do you think he will? Logan thought about Brandon's voice on the phone that morning. The specific quality of someone locating honesty in a place where it had not recently been practiced. "I think he's figuring out who he wants to be," Logan said. "That takes time, and it's harder when the person you're figuring it out against is your father." Lily looked back at her drawing. "That must be awful," she said. It was not dramatic. It was simply accurate. And it was said with the particular empathy of a child who had spent 3 years watching her own father figure out who he wanted to be. Logan pulled into the driveway and cut the engine, and they sat for a moment. "I'm proud of you," Lily said. Logan looked at her. "For today," she said. "For all of it. For not being smaller than you are." She looked back at the hawk drawing. "That was the bravest thing I've seen you do." He had fought 2 championship bouts. He had been on his knee with a referee counting and stood up and kept going. He had spent 3 years building a life from the raw material of grief. And his daughter had just told him the bravest thing she'd seen him do was stop pretending to be smaller than he was. He sat with that for a long moment. "Go inside," he said. "I'll make dinner." She got out of the truck. At the front door, she paused and looked back at him. "Pasta," she said. "Pasta," he agreed. She went inside. Logan sat in the truck for another few minutes, looking at the house, at the light in the kitchen window, at the ordinary, beautiful shape of the life he had built. Then he went inside and made dinner. The week after the council vote was quieter than Logan expected and louder than he wanted. The quiet came from Richard Cole, who had not been seen publicly in Cedar Hollow since he walked out of the municipal building Sunday afternoon. His office issued a brief statement on Monday saying that Cole Properties respected the council's decision and would review its options going forward. The statement was 11 sentences long and contained no apology, no acknowledgement of the specific conduct Patricia had documented, and no mention of Brandon. Logan read it once and filed it in the category of things that said exactly what they were, by saying almost nothing. The loud part came from everywhere else. Patricia's full story ran on Monday morning, not just the Cedar Hollow piece, but the regional investigation, all 3 towns, all 3 community leaders who had been targeted, all 3 sets of documented tactics. It was the kind of reporting that does not simply describe a problem, but demonstrates its dimensions. And the dimensions in this case were significant enough that 2 other publications picked up the story by Tuesday, and a regional television news program ran a segment Wednesday evening that used the photograph of Logan in his garage with the championship belt in the background as its opening image. Logan did not watch the segment. Lily watched it on Martha's laptop at the library and called him afterward to report on it with the precision of a field researcher summarizing observations. "They used the photo Dennis took," she said. "The one where you're looking sideways." "I know. You look serious." I was in the middle of a sentence. "It works," she said. Martha cried a little bit when they read the Marcus part. "Tell her I said thank you. She knows." Logan was in the garage when he got this call. 3/4 through a timing belt job on a Toyota that had been waiting while the previous 2 weeks had unfolded. He had spent the last 2 mornings simply working the specific, absorbed, quiet work that required his hands and his attention, and left his mind free to do whatever it needed to do, which mostly involved processing a considerable amount of accumulated tension in the patient way that hands-on work allows. The calls had been coming in since Monday. Not threatening calls. The opposite. People he knew in Cedar Hollow who had read the article. People from his fighting life who had seen the segment. 2 journalists from other outlets who wanted to follow up. A lawyer in Denver who handled civil claims related to business interference and wanted to discuss whether Logan had grounds for action against Cole Properties. He had not yet returned the lawyer's call. He was not in a hurry. On Wednesday afternoon, Ray Costello drove up from Denver. He arrived at the garage unannounced, which was typical of Ray, who had always operated on the assumption that the people he cared about would be available to him because he had the good judgment not to show up unless something was worth showing up for. He was 61 years old and had the build of a man who had spent his entire adult life around athletes and had absorbed their physical discipline by proximity. He walked into the garage, looked around, looked at Logan, and said, "Nice place." "It's a garage," Logan said. "And your apartment in Denver was a studio. You have always been a man who doesn't need much space." Ray picked up a wrench from the workbench and turned it over in his hand, the way people pick up objects in new spaces to give their hands something to do while they figure out what they actually came to say. "I came because I wanted to see it. The place you built. You could have called. I wanted to see it," Ray repeated, in a tone that made clear the call would not have served the same purpose. Logan set down what he was working on. He wiped his hands. He looked at the man who had spent a decade managing his professional life, the scheduling, the contracts, the negotiations, the specific combat of the business side of a sport that was itself a specific kind of combat. "Sit down," Logan said. Ray sat on the stool. Logan leaned against the workbench. "The lawyer who called you," Ray said. "Allison Marsh. She's good. I know her work. If you want to pursue the business interference angle, she's the person." "I know," Logan said. "I haven't decided. What's holding you back?" Logan thought about it. "I won the thing I needed to win," he said. "The park is still there. The amended proposal was denied. The full story is in the public record. Those are the things that mattered to me." He paused. "A lawsuit is a different kind of fight. It takes years, and it costs money, and it requires me to stay in this specific conflict when I would rather spend that time on my daughter." Ray was quiet for a moment. "Richard Cole hurt your business," he said. "The fake review, the garage intrusion, those are real losses." "Yes," Logan said, "and I have documentation of all of it. The option to pursue it doesn't expire tomorrow." He looked at Ray. "I want to talk to Lily first. It affects her life too." Ray nodded slowly. He turned the wrench over again. "You know what I thought when I read the article?" he said. "I thought, this is the most Logan Hayes thing that has ever happened. All of it. The 3 years of quiet, the garage, the park, the petition. And then, when it became necessary, not anger, not performance, just the truth, delivered with complete precision." He set the wrench down. "That was always your best weapon. I just never thought I'd see you use it somewhere other than a ring." Logan looked at the workbench. "It's a better place to use it," he said. The twist Logan had not anticipated came on Thursday. It came in the form of a phone call from Dave Kowalski, the planning committee member who had been their inside source on the council dynamics from the beginning. Dave's voice had a different quality than usual, not alarmed, exactly, but careful in a way that meant he was managing information. "Something has come up," Dave said. "I need to tell you before you hear it somewhere else." "Go ahead," Logan said. Richard Cole's company filed a complaint with the State Contractor Licensing Board yesterday against your garage. They're alleging that some of the work performed on vehicles over the past year was not properly documented and may have involved unlicensed subcontracting. Logan was very still. "That's false," he said. "I know it's false," Dave said. "You've been a solo operation since you opened. Everyone knows that. But the complaint triggers an automatic review, which means an investigator will contact you, which means it's going to take time and paperwork to resolve. And in the meantime, the complaint is technically part of the public record." Logan processed the shape of what he was hearing. Richard Cole had lost the vote. He had lost the public narrative. His son had testified against his own interests in a public room. His company was under investigative reporting from a regional journalist, and his response to all of that was to file a licensing complaint. Not a devastating strategic move. A spite move. The move of a man who is losing and knows it, and cannot stop himself from doing something. Anything, to make the losing cost as much as possible. "When will the investigator contact me?" Logan said. "Probably within 2 weeks," Dave said. "Logan, this is not going to go anywhere. Your records are clean. I know that, and so does anyone who's paid attention. But I wanted you to know it was coming. I appreciate it," Logan said. He thought for a moment. "Dave, is there a process for filing a counter-complaint? For frivolous regulatory actions?" "There is," Dave said. "Tell me about it," Dave told him. It was not a simple process, but it was not a complicated one either. It required documentation. A clear timeline demonstrating that the complaint had been filed in the context of an ongoing dispute, and evidence that the allegations were demonstrably false. Logan had all 3 things. He called Allison Marsh, the lawyer Ray had mentioned. 30 minutes after he hung up with Dave, she answered on the second ring. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "I've been following the Cedar Hollow situation. I was wondering when you'd call." "I have a new development," he said. He told her about the licensing complaint. She was quiet for about 4 seconds. Then she said, "That's a gift." "Explain that to me," Logan said. "Because it establishes continued bad faith," she said. "The original campaign against you, the reviews, the garage intrusion, the school call, those are actionable on their own. But proving intent requires us to demonstrate a pattern. He just added to the pattern. In writing, with a filing date, 2 days after losing a public vote. While under active investigative reporting, she paused. Mr. Hayes, I want to take this case. I want to take it on a contingency basis. I think Cole Properties is exposed in ways that extend significantly beyond what happened to you in Cedar Hollow. Logan sat with that for a moment. He thought about what he had told Ray, that a lawsuit was a different kind of fight, that it would take years. He thought about Lily. He thought about the 3 other community leaders in 3 other towns who had been targeted by the same pattern and who had not had a championship belt in a box in their closet, and a regional journalist who happened to be in their situation. I'm going to talk to my daughter tonight, he said. I'll call you tomorrow. Fair enough, Allison said. For what it's worth, what Brandon Cole said in that council room may be the most valuable piece of this. If he's willing to give a formal statement, the case becomes considerably stronger. I know, Logan said. He hung up and sat in the quiet garage for a long moment. He thought about what it meant to fight, not the physical version of it that he had always understood. He had understood it since he was 19 years old in a gym in Denver with a trainer who had spotted something in the way he moved. The physical version of a fight had rules and time limits, and a referee, and a moment when it was definitively over. This version of it, the civic, legal human version, did not have those things. It was slower and less clean, and the endings were rarely as clear as a hand raised in a ring. But it ran on the same fuel: discipline, precision, the willingness to stay focused when everything around you was designed to make you lose focus. He had been doing it for 3 years without knowing it was what he was doing. He was going to keep doing it. He picked up his tools and went back to work. He talked to Lily that evening at the kitchen table. After dinner, with the championship belt still sitting in the corner of the table where it had been since Friday night and showed no sign of being returned to any box, he told her about the licensing complaint. He explained what it meant and what it did not mean. He told her about Allison Marsh and what Allison had said about the case and about Brandon's potential role in it. Lily listened to all of it, with her hands folded on the table. When he finished, she said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to pursue it," he said. "But it's going to mean that our lives are in this for a while longer. It's not going to be quick. Is it the right thing to do?" "Yes," he said. "Not just for us. For the people in the other towns. For the next town that comes up in Richard Cole's plans." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Then do it," she said. "I can handle it taking a while." "You're 9, he said. "Almost 10, she said. "And I've been handling things for 3 years already." She said it without resentment. It was simply true. And she knew it was true, and Logan knew it was true. And the knowing sat between them with the particular honesty that had always characterized the way he and his daughter talked to each other at their best. "There's one more thing," he said. "The case may require us to be public about some things. About my history, about your mother, the way the article was, but more." Lily looked at him. "About Mom," she said. "Yes. Because she's part of why you came here." "Yes." Lily looked at the championship belt. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "She would want us to fight it. You know that." "I know that," Logan said. "So fight it," Lily said, "and stop asking me if I'm okay with things that are clearly the right things to do." Logan looked at his daughter, at the 9-year-old who had her mother's face and her mother's patience and her mother's absolute clarity about what mattered and what did not, and felt the specific gratitude that has no adequate expression. The gratitude of a person who has been given something they did not deserve and knows it. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. She picked up her pencil and opened her notebook. "Can I draw in here while you call the lawyer back?" "Yes," he said. He called Allison Marsh. He called Brandon Cole the next morning. Brandon answered on the 3rd ring, which was 1 ring more than the first time, which told Logan that Brandon had seen the name and had spent 1 ring deciding whether to pick up the complaint they filed against your garage. Brandon said, before Logan could speak, "I heard about it." "How?" Logan said. "My father told me," Brandon said. "He called me last night. He wanted me to know that he wasn't finished. That was the phrase he used, not finished. A pause. He also told me that what I did at the council meeting was a betrayal that he was not going to forget. Logan, the weight of that. The specific weight of a parent's conditional love being explicitly withdrawn. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be, Brandon said. The certainty in his voice was different from the certainty he had performed in the park, less performed. More actual. I knew what would happen. I made the choice knowing. Another pause. Why are ya calling? Because our attorney wants to know if you'd be willing to give a formal statement, Logan said. About the park. About what you know of your father's instructions regarding the campaign against me. Not about what I told you to say. About what you actually know. Silence on the line for a long moment. If I do that, Brandon said, I'm testifying against my father in a legal context. Yes, Logan said. That's different from a public comment at a council meeting. It is, Logan said. He did not soften it. Much different. The silence lasted longer this time. Logan waited. He was good at waiting. He had spent a considerable part of his life learning how. Can I think about it? Brandon said. Yes, Logan said. Take the time you need. This is not a decision to make quickly, Mr. Hayes, Brandon said. Can I ask you something? Yes. In the park. When Kevin had Lily's bag and I told him to drop it, did you know it was me who told him? No, Logan said. I found that out on the phone with you Saturday morning. But you didn't do anything to Kevin when he dropped it, even before you knew. No, Logan said. Why? Logan thought about it. He thought about Kevin's face in that moment, the confused expression of a person who had not consciously decided to drop the bag, but whose body had made the decision ahead of his brain, responding to something in Logan's presence that his conscious mind had not yet processed. Because the bag was on the ground, Logan said. The situation was resolved. What would have been the point? Brandon was quiet for a long time. That's the thing I keep thinking about, he finally said. You had every reason to make it worse, and you just didn't. You went and got your daughter and you walked away. Yes, Logan said. Most people don't do that, Brandon said. Most people don't practice it, Logan said. It's not natural. It's trained. The same way anything else is trained. Can it be trained if you didn't start when you were 19? Logan understood what the question was actually asking. He thought about it honestly. Yes, he said. It's harder. But yes. Brandon said he would think about statement and call back within a week. He hung up. Logan set his phone down and went back to work. 6 weeks after the council vote, 3 things happened in the same week that collectively constituted the pivot point of the story, the moment when the weight shifted from one side to the other and became something permanent. The first was that the licensing board investigator completed her review of Logan's garage and issued a written finding that the complaint filed by Cole Properties was without merit and had been filed without adequate factual basis. The finding was a public document. Allison Marsh had already anticipated it and had prepared the counter-complaint filing, which she submitted the same afternoon the finding was issued. The second was that Patricia Yu published a follow-up piece that named, specifically, and with documentation, 2 of the people who had been hired to execute the campaigns against Logan, the fake reviews, the garage intrusion, the contact with the school. Both of them had agreed to speak on record after Allison's investigation had made clear that their exposure was significant and that cooperation was likely to be treated differently than non-cooperation. Neither of them was Richard Cole himself, but the documentation they provided created a paper trail that led directly to Cole Properties' operational accounts. The third thing was Brandon. Brandon called Logan on a Thursday evening and said, simply, I'm ready to give the statement. Logan said, I'll connect you with Allison Marsh. Brandon said, Okay, Logan said. Brandon, you understand what this means for your relationship with your father. Brandon said, We don't have a relationship. We have a transaction that I've been calling a relationship for 23 years. I'm done with the transaction. Logan had no response to that would have been adequate. So he said nothing and connected Brandon with Allison and stayed out of the rest of it. The statement Brandon gave was specific, detailed, and damaging. It addressed Not only Cedar Hollow but events in 2 of the 3 other communities Patricia had investigated, where Brandon had been present for conversations he had not understood at the time but understood now. It included the name of the person Richard Cole had instructed to contact the elementary school. It included documentation of a communication between Richard Cole and the person who had arranged the garage intrusion. Allison called Logan after she received Brandon's statement and spoke in the tone of a lawyer who has just been handed something considerably better than she expected. "This changes the exposure significantly," she said. "We're no longer talking about a civil claim. We're talking about a referral to the state AG's office." "Do it," Logan said. "You understand that takes it out of your hands," she said. "Once the AG is involved, the timeline and the outcome are not yours to control." "I know," Logan said. "Do it anyway." She did. The Saturday morning after the AG referral was filed, Logan took Lily to Oak Ridge Park. It was the first Saturday in 6 weeks that they had come without any specific purpose other than the one they had always come for: Lily's birds. The pond, the cottonwoods, the particular quality of the morning that neither of them had ever been able to describe, but both of them recognized as the thing the park was made of. They parked in the usual spot. Lily was out of the truck before the engine was off, which was also usual, and she was moving toward the cottonwoods before Logan had the thermos in his hand, which was completely typical. Martha was at the bench near the pond with her canvas bag. She waved. Logan waved back. Gerald arrived 7 minutes after they did, with 2 cups of coffee from the diner in a cardboard carrier, which was new and which meant Gerald had been paying attention to the fact that Logan's thermos coffee was, as Gerald had once put it, technically coffee, in the same way that a gas station hot dog was technically food. Logan took the cup. It was considerably better than the thermos. They stood beside the bench and watched Lily at the water's edge. "State AG filed a preliminary inquiry notice to Cole Properties yesterday," Gerald said. "I know," Logan said. "Patricia's going to keep covering it." "I know." Richard Cole's attorney issued a statement saying, "The inquiry is without merit and politically motivated." "Of course," Logan said. Gerald sipped his coffee. "Dave Kowalski thinks the original proposal is dead now, even if Cole Properties tries to refile. The council has the pattern documented, and the community has been paying attention. He says it would take a completely different approach to get anything through." "Maybe it should," Logan said. "A completely different approach. From a completely different company that actually talked to the town instead of pressuring it." Gerald looked at him. "You'd support development that was designed with the community?" "I'd support a conversation," Logan said. "This park matters because people come here. If you're going to change anything around it, you start by understanding why people come here. You don't start with renderings." Gerald thought about that. "You should run for the council." "No," Logan said. "Why not?" "Because my daughter needs a father more than this town needs me on the council," Logan said. "Martha is better suited for it than I am anyway." Gerald looked across the pond to where Martha was distributing bread crusts with the systematic efficiency of a woman who had organized information for 30 years and applied the same methodology to waterfowl. "That is probably true," Gerald said. "Should I suggest it to her?" "She's already thinking about it," Logan said. "She decided after the vote." "I could tell." Gerald sipped his coffee. "How do you know things before they've been said?" "I pay attention," Logan said. "It's the only skill I have that actually matters." Gerald made a sound that was either agreement or the acknowledgement that some things did not need to be argued about. They stood in comfortable silence for a while. Across the pond, Lily had gone still at the water's edge with her pencil raised, which meant she had spotted something. Logan watched her. She stayed still for a full 2 minutes, the patience of someone who had learned that the thing worth seeing rarely announced itself, that you had to earn it by being quieter than everything around you. Then she drew. Whatever she had seen, she had captured it. Logan felt it in his chest, that specific warmth that was not quite pride and not quite love, but the particular intersection of both that only a parent can feel. The warmth of watching someone you are responsible for be fully and completely themselves. He thought about the box in his closet. The tape he had cut open. The belt on the kitchen table that had not gone back in any box. He had made a decision about the belt. He had not told Lily yet. He was going to tell her today. He waited until she came back from the cottonwoods. Notebook under her arm, with the specific satisfaction on her face that meant the morning had produced something worth producing. She sat beside him on the bench and opened the notebook and showed him. It was the hawk again. But different from the drawing she had made the afternoon, everything started. That drawing had caught the hawk in the moment before the dive, the anticipation, the coiled potential. This drawing caught the hawk in the moment after wings spread, rising, carrying whatever it had taken from the water up into the open air. Logan looked at it for a long time. "That's remarkable," he said. Lily studied it critically. "The left wing is slightly off," she said. "It looks right to me." "You're not a hawk expert." "No," he said. "But I know what something looks like when it's free." She looked at him at that. And something in her expression softened from the critical artist mode into something younger and more open. "What were you going to tell me?" she said. "I can tell you have something, the belt," he said. "I want to donate it to the community center. For the youth program, they're starting the one about discipline and confidence. I want it to be there, on the wall, where kids can see it." Lily looked at him. "Not in the box," she said. "Not in the box," he said. "Where people can see it. Where people can see it and understand what it actually means," he said. "Which is not that I was good at fighting. It's that I spent 10 years learning how to be precise and disciplined and in control of myself, under pressure. That's worth something to a kid who needs to see that it's possible." Lily looked back at her drawing. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can I come when you donate it?" "Yes," he said. "Can I say something when we're there?" Logan looked at her. "What would you say?" She thought about it. "I'd say that my dad won that belt by never stopping, even when he was on his knee and losing, and that the same thing that made him a champion is what made him a good father, and that those two things are the same thing, not two different things." Logan was quiet for a moment. He thought, "Sarah, you should be here for this. You should be sitting on this bench right now, listening to your daughter say that." He thought, "She got that from you. The precision of it. The way she found the exact true center of a thing and named it without ornamentation." He thought, "I have done one genuinely good thing in my life beyond everything I accomplished in a ring. And it is sitting next to me on this bench with a drawing of a hawk and a pencil case and a field guide that she handles with both hands." "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what you should say." Lily nodded once. She closed her notebook. She looked at the pond. Martha was refilling her canvas bag. Gerald was on his phone, probably texting Dave Kowalski something about council procedure. The Ducks were doing what Ducks do on Saturday mornings in Colorado, which is whatever they want. Oak Ridge Park was still there. The cottonwoods were still there. The birds were still coming back every season. And Logan Hayes, the mechanic, the father, the man who had kept a championship belt in a box for 3 years because he had been trying to become something different, who had discovered in the process of becoming something different that the thing he had been and the thing he had become were not opposites, but continuations. Logan Hayes was sitting on a bench in the park he had helped save, next to the daughter he had spent 9 years protecting, in the town where he had spent 3 years learning that quiet was not the same as small, and that the most powerful thing a man can do is know exactly what he is and refuse to use it as anything other than a shield. That was the truth of him. It had always been the truth of him. He had just needed the right fight to make it visible. A real champion is not the person who wins when winning is easy. A real champion is the person who has been on his knee, who has heard the referee counting, who has looked up at the lights and felt the full weight of the moment pressing down, and who has stood back up anyway. Not because standing up was certain to succeed, but because staying down was not something he was willing to do. Logan Hayes had been standing up his entire life, and now, finally, on a Saturday morning in Oak Ridge Park with the Colorado mountains above him and his daughter beside him, and the life he had built whole and intact around him, he was standing up all the way.